An iconic bridge on the ground, a nation in shock. Key Bridge 1.9B estimate 5.2B bill. Who's paying? That's the question haunting Washington and the American taxpayer's pocket right now. What was supposed to be a planned reconstruction has spiraled into unprecedented financial chaos. Billions of dollars are on the line, while the insurance blame game kicks into high gear. The truth behind the Key Bridge, 1.9B estimate, 5.2B bill, who's paying, is deeper and darker than the mainstream media lets on. You need to understand how this hits your safety and your wallet before the bill lands on your doorstep. Subscribe to the channel right now to stay ahead of the curve and protect your financial future with the truth. We are on a mission to reach our first 1,000 subscribers, and your support is the key to keeping this independent investigation alive. Topic 1. Reality check. The fragility of modern infrastructure. You know, it's fascinating and honestly, a bit scary how we just get used to the solid stuff around us without ever questioning what's actually holding it up. When the Francis Scott Key Bridge went down in the middle of the night, it wasn't just a steel structure that collapsed. It was that sense of security the average American feels on their morning commute. There's that old saying that nothing is so strong it can't be broken, right? Well, we saw that play out in real time, and the impact was huge, proving that even Baltimore's giants have their Achilles heel. To wrap your head around this, imagine you built a sturdy shelf years ago, but today you're trying to stack triple the weight on it. The result is a no-brainer, don't you think? Our bridges were designed back when container ships were practically miniatures compared to the massive behemoths crossing the Patapsco today. It's a wake-up call to reflect on how we're maintaining the backbone of our country. If you want to dive into this prevention mindset, check out The Work's Anatomy of a City by Kate Asher. She breaks down how these urban gears are way more sensitive than they look. It really makes you think over a cup of coffee, how something so vital to global trade and the daily lives of thousands of families could be cut off so abruptly by a single point of failure. We see the search and recovery teams working, and you can already smell change in the air, the kind of shift that happens when pride takes a back seat to the urgent need for repair. This initial shock was just the tip of the iceberg, though, because the real challenge isn't what fell down, but what it's going to take to build it back up. Topic 2. Crisis math. How did $1.9 billion turn into $5.2 billion? You know how it goes when you budget for a home renovation. There's always a burst pipe or some old wiring that nobody saw coming, right? Well, multiply that by a monumental scale and you've got the Baltimore financial puzzle, where the initial estimate of nearly $2 billion felt like a distant memory overnight, compared to the $5 billion reality. This isn't just about inflation or red tape. It's the sheer complexity of clearing a vital channel while designing a structure that needs to be, at the very least, future-proofed against the new titans of the sea. To give you a practical idea of how money vanishes in projects this big, think about the cost of mobilizing cutting-edge tech and the sheer urgency that steamrolls any traditional bidding schedule. If you want to understand how massive public works spin out of control, take a look at the concept of optimism bias, explained by Bent Flyvbjerg in his book, How Big Things Get Done. He shows exactly why we tend to lowball risks and costs on mega projects. In the Key Bridge case, every day the port is closed is a wound bleeding out the economy, forcing the government to sign blank checks just to speed up the inevitable. It's wild to see how numbers take on a life of their own and start spooking even the most optimistic folks, turning a rebuild into a true test of patience for the public purse. You start realizing the rabbit hole goes way deeper when you notice we aren't just paying for concrete and steel. We're paying for war room logistics, involving everything from elite divers to engineers who get paid more per hour than most people see in a month. This price hike is creating a pressure cooker in the Capitol, setting the stage for a knockdown, drag-out fight over who's actually going to foot this hefty bill. Topic 3. The bureaucratic maze and the battle for indemnity. You know the old saying about better safe than sorry? Well, in Baltimore's case, it looks like sorry is trying to dodge the bill entirely. The legal situation behind the bridge collapse is a total mess, with the ship's owner trying to hide behind maritime laws from the 1800s to cap their liability. It's like someone totaled your car and tried to pay you for a single tire because of some prehistoric rule. The frustration is real, and the US government is moving heaven and earth to make sure the private sector doesn't dump this entire check on the taxpayer's lap. For those of you who like to know the rules of the game, this is a classic case study in tort law and maritime limitation. If you want to see how this works in the real world, look up the Limitation of Liability Act of 1851, the same law used in the Titanic case, which is now at the center of this multi-billion-dollar tug-of-war. It's a high-stakes chess match where every court filing could save hundreds of millions for one side or create an astronomical loss for the other, meaning we taxpayers have to watch every single move the federal courts make. At the end of the day, we realize that justice doesn't always move as fast as people's needs do, and this legal limbo creates a cloud of uncertainty hanging over the city. It's a messy dance between global insurers, ship owners, and the Department of Justice, where nobody wants to be the one holding the hot potato when the music stops. While the paperwork gathers dust on judges' desks, public pressure is starting to shift from the courtrooms to the halls of Washington, where the real decisions about the big bucks are starting to get aggressive. Topic 4. The taxpayer's burden. This is where theory hits reality, and the conversation starts squeezing the pockets of the people who actually keep this country running. At the end of the day, when the dust settles and the lawyers are still arguing over commas, that $5.2 billion bill doesn't just float away. It has to land somewhere, and that somewhere is usually the public fund. The big controversy in D.C. right now is whether the federal government should shoulder 100% of the costs, as some leaders argue, or if that sets a dangerous precedent where the state becomes the bailout king for private company blunders. If you want to understand how this hits home, just look at your own rainy day fund. When you pull money out of emergency savings to fix a roof, that's money not going toward your kids' college or your own retirement. On a government level, every cent funneled into the Key Bridge could mean putting off repairs on other crumbling roads and bridges across the country that are screaming for help. For anyone wanting to go deeper on how public money gets drained in a crisis, Henry Hazlitt's Economics in One Lesson is a must-read. It teaches you to see not just what's being built, but what wasn't built because that money was tied up. You can feel the political heat rising because the American taxpayer, especially in states far away from Maryland, is starting to ask why their hard-earned tax dollars should fund a disaster caused by a foreign-flagged ship. It's a trial by fire for national unity, where solidarity is clashing head-on with fiscal pragmatism, sparking a heated debate about priorities and accountability. This financial tug-of-war is creating a tension that reaches far beyond Baltimore, setting the stage for the bitter lessons we have to learn so the next billion isn't wasted due to a lack of foresight. Topic 5. The future of logistics and expensive lessons. You know that feeling when you learn a hard lesson and think, man, that could have been a lot cheaper. Well, the Key Bridge collapse is the biggest wake-up call modern logistics has ever received. We can't ignore it anymore. The world has changed, and our infrastructure is often a relic of the last century, trying to handle the brutal demands of today. Rebuilding in Baltimore isn't just about putting steel and concrete back where it was. It's about redesigning how trade flows and how we can shield our ports from domino effect events that paralyze the economy in a heartbeat. If you want to see this change in mindset in action, keep an eye on how new engineering guidelines are now calling for much tougher protection islands around bridge piers. It's like installing a backup system for your business. It feels like an extra expense until the day the main server crashes. For those who love strategy and want to anticipate these risks in business or life, I highly recommend Nassim Taleb's Anti-Fragile. It teaches you how to build systems that don't just survive shocks, but actually get better because of them. Ultimately, we're realizing that the price of neglect is always higher than the investment in prevention, and this $5 billion bill is the receipts. The future of logistics now involves much tighter oversight and technological integration that used to sound like sci-fi. There's a sense that, despite the bitter cost, Baltimore could become the blueprint for resilience for the rest of the world, turning a tragedy into a new standard for safety. But the question that won't go away is still echoing through the halls of power, waiting for a final answer. Conclusion. Now that the cards are on the table and the billion-dollar figures have been exposed, the big question for you is, are we going to keep accepting that neglect and red tape define our country's future? Knowledge without action is just noise. So, I'm inviting you to look around, question your local leaders, and get involved in the debate about how our tax dollars are being protected or wasted. Would you rather be the passenger watching the bridge fall, or the citizen demanding the solid foundations that America deserves? Real change only happens when we stop just watching and start demanding accountability from the ones holding the pen. If you value the truth behind the numbers and want to stay a step ahead in understanding what moves our economy, subscribe to the channel right now and turn on notifications. Don't let the next disaster catch you off guard. Join us to keep learning how to read between the lines of the system.